Hey, Serious Crocodile here. Let's take a look at this yellow tank card that I created as a reward for the Dripcraft site, where you will be able to craft this tank out of a few components, such as a few bicycle wheels, probably something like gunpowder, maybe some yellow paint. Let's see what we need to build this thing. And for now, let's take a look at it from a technical perspective, because I think it's an interesting case study on how I work with Blender to create this 2D, 2.5D effect, using all the tools that are available to us in Blender for reference. So as you can see, we just switched to the Blender workspace, and the nice thing in Blender is that everything is real time. We have the Eevee render engine, which is rendering real time while we work in the workspace. We can of course pause and draw and do whatever, but we can also just let it play and investigate the environment we're working in. And as you can see, this is my sketch where I actually first planned the design of this tank. So I have two designs. This is the one I worked with first, and here on the right you can see the finished piece. If I pan in the workspace like this, you'll see that this is pure 2D animation, or 2.5 if you will, because as you can see, the background is slightly behind the tank itself, but the back wheels of the tank appear to be behind the tank. So it's a blend of everything, and we will explore these techniques in upcoming episodes of this behind the scenes series. But for now, I will just go over the process of creating the tank from scratch to finish. So starting from the sketch, I'm modeling this tank in 3D. It's a very simple model, and I'm not much of a modeler, but I don't really need to be very good at modeling. I use this as a reference only. It's very cool that we can reference these very subtle motions, like I'm going to keyframe right here. I parented the tank model to this null object, and I'm animating the null object into this kind of bouncing animation, and I have this wonderful reference that I can use now to trace the 2D. These movements are looped, and they serve as a reference for the grease pencil object that I have instantiated here. And as you can see, I'm just fine-tuning the movement a little bit, and I keep tracing these lines, this 3D object in a 2D space. And while I'm doing this, I'm adding little details such as the little, like the iron plates and the movement of them. It's much more organic than the 3D model, and I intentionally make it rough to keep this 2D aspect in the actual animation. So if I want to add something like a little window in the front, I can just go back to the 3D model, and because I have parented the 3D model to the animated null object, it's very easy to keep those X-Y axis in place and just add little things like the reference of the window, and to keep creating these this 2D animation. It's a lot of fun to add these details, like the screws that are dropping out of the tank as it's making its way up and down, and it's a real ramshackle business. This tank is kind of breaking down as it is riding around. So as I said before, I can always add new things to the reference material. I'm ready to add those wheels, for example. So it's really nice to know where they are to create a convincing placement of the wheels while it's riding and while keeping the whole motion intact of the vehicle. The sculpt tool allows us to create the movement of the wheels without having to redraw the wheel every single frame. I can just push the lines around, and then I'm going to manually add the rim to it. I just add the center of the wheel so I know where it needs to go. The spokes of the bicycle wheel are just placed very randomly, because that's just how I like to draw them. I always like to keep the quirkiness of the animation in there. And there you go, we have all the basics of the tank. Coloring this in is another little tedious project. Every frame needs to be colored separately. Again, with the sculpt tool, we can easily put the fill of the tank on a separate layer so we don't affect the other layers while we're pushing around the outline of the fill every single frame. It's good to keep every part of the animation on a separate layer so we can actually add shading in a much more efficient way. Once we have one wheel, we can use it and put it on different layers and make some adaptations to it so it's actually in the right spot. Like the back wheel is actually the same wheel as the front one. It's just placed a little bit differently, and it's placed on a layer below the tank body and the other wheel. We can do this for the 4 wheels. This can end up in a huge amount of layers, but in my opinion, you can't have enough layers. More layers is just more control over the animation. We're almost done with this. I'm just animating these cables between the bicycle wheels by hand. And there you go. That is our tank animation. The background is added afterwards, and I didn't record this part of the animation, but it's a similar process, and I will share more tips later.